So just a few weeks ago, the Utah Jazz were kicked out the playoffs by the Dallas Mavericks. I'm not gonna lie, it wouldn't have been as big of a deal if the Jazz lost to a fully healthy Mavericks team, but they lost to a Mavericks team that was missing their best player and basically their whole offense in Luka Doncic for half the series, and the Jazz still couldn't pull off a first-round win. In this series, we saw a lot of dysfunction and just straight up big problems with this Jazz team, and yet this is another year where they're very disappointing. It's pretty obvious that big changes are coming to Utah, and recently we've heard about how Rudy Gobert might have said that the Jazz need to either trade him or Donovan Mitchell, and that has led me to make this video where I'll be discussing whether or not I think the Jazz should trade Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert. I'm first going to talk about why they should and they shouldn't trade Donovan Mitchell, then I'm going to talk about why they should and shouldn't trade Rudy Gobert. And at the end of the video, I'm going to come to a conclusion on who I think they should trade and what I think they should do. But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. Also, if you want to struggle with 3,000 subscribers, also drop a comment on this video. I do respond to all of my comments, and play that intro.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
But before we get into the video, I ask you to drop Donovan Mitchell as it does how my channel grow. Shouldn't trade it because Mitchell is flat out a superstar in the league, and he's going to continue to be that for the next couple of years. He's already made the All-Star team multiple times in his very short career. He's already a guy who can show and can be a 28 points per game scorer. He might not be the most efficient player in the league, but when he's playing well, he's really good. I truly believe he's an offensive superstar, top 5 shooting guard in the league. Besides this year's playoffs and a few other series, he has always been a playoff performer that elevates his game significantly. Obviously, I don't think he's reached his full potential. I think he can get way better than he has shown to be. Obviously, he has flaws in his game. Sometimes he turns to a ball hawk, sometimes he turns to a shot chucker, tries to do too much things like that. But I think people are forgetting how good this guy is just because he had one bad series. Last postseason, he almost averaged 35 points per game. One bad playoff series does not mean he's a worse player. I feel like way too much people forget that. Mitchell is by far the most popular player the Jazz have had since Karl Malone. Maybe Darren Williams comes close, but nonetheless, Mitchell is bringing a lot of tickets to this franchise, and flat out, he's a 24 to 25-year-old guard averaging over 25 points. You don't just trade that easily. But the reasons you might actually should trade him is because over the last few years, he has shown that with him as the best player, you're not going to be able to make it as far as you would want in the playoffs. I'm not saying it's his fault, because a lot of times he really balled out and it was his teammates' fault, but a few times it has been his fault for the team not advancing as far as they wanted to. Also, he might not be like a perfect guy to fit around because of his ball dominance and his inconsistency. Also, he might just leave you anyways. There's been rumors of him wanting to switch teams, go to a bigger market, stuff like that. So imagine you trade Rudy Gobert, then he leaves you in free agency. That would be absolutely terrible. I think there's a real reason that Donovan Mitchell leaves the Jazz, because the Jazz are one of the smallest markets in the league. If he were to go to a team like the New York Knicks, he would become one of the most popular players in the league, has one of the most entertaining play styles. Also, if you trade Donovan Mitchell, you're definitely getting a humongous package for him. He's a young and up-and-coming superstar in the league. He's definitely getting you a lot of assets that can help you improve the team, maybe even try and build around Rudy Gobert. Also, there's been a lot of chemistry problems with the Utah Jazz. I don't know if they're because of Mitchell or if Gobert's the problem, but whoever it is, that's just another reason to trade him. There's lots of pros and cons to trading Donovan Mitchell, but regardless, this cannot be an easy decision to do. This guy is good. To discuss the argument for Rudy Gobert, the reason to not trade him is because in the regular season, he's definitely the most impactful defender in the league. Even though people love to hate on him for what he does in the playoffs, I generally think the bigger problem with Utah's defense is that their perimeter defenders are just absolutely terrible, and they leave so much of the work to Rudy Gobert. I'm not saying he's a perfect defender, he's not good on the perimeter, but at the end of the day, defenders at his level are very rare to find, and having a good guy who's very impactful on one side of the floor is really important, because if you take him off this team is probably struggling in the play-in tournament because their defense is going to fall off a cliff. They're probably the worst defense in the league. On offense, we can't act like he's terrible. Like, people act like he's actually a negative on offense. He's averaging 16 points on the highest field goal percentage in the league. He's a top 5 lob target in the league. Rudy brings a lot of things to this team, and honestly, if you put better perimeter defenders around him, the Jazz by far would be the best defense in the league, maybe even a historical great defense. Sure, their offense will fall off because a lot of their best offensive players are not good defenders, but nonetheless, Rudy Gobert is a generational defender, and I just don't think he's been being used well in Utah's system. I think he's a more impactful player than Donovan Mitchell, but he doesn't have the same potential that Mitchell has. And to talk about why they should trade him, simply from what we've seen from him in the playoffs, his defense always becomes less valuable. And at this point, if you're Utah, you're trying to win the championship, and if your second best player becomes a liability on the court and becomes way worse in the playoffs, it might be time to move on from him. Rudy's also on a humongous contract, and you might not want to pay him that much amount of money if his value just continues to decrease. Also, you have to realize that for Donovan Mitchell, you would gain a solid package, but you can still get a really good package for Rudy Gobert. Many teams would definitely use a center like Rudy Gobert, and I feel like a lot of teams believe they could use him better than the Utah Jazz have been using him, and I would actually agree with those teams. Rudy is also having chemistry issues with a lot of the team, mainly Donovan Mitchell, so it's kind of obvious one of these guys got to go. And obviously, I'm not on the Jazz. I don't know who's causing trouble, but if it is Rudy, that's just another reason to move him. And just straight up, Rudy is not going to sell you as much tickets as Donovan Mitchell does. And I know you guys are thinking, oh, the Jazz don't care about tickets, they're just trying to win. But at the end of the day, I promise you, the owner and the general manager is thinking about how much tickets they are selling. Even if they might be a slightly better team with Rudy Gobert, like being on the team and them trading Donovan Mitchell, I promise you their tickets will decrease crazy amount if Rudy Gobert is the best player on this team. But regardless, I don't think trading Rudy Gobert is as obvious as some people think it is. To answer the question of who the Jazz should trade, in my opinion, the answer has to be Rudy Gobert. Even though Rudy might be a little bit more impactful and stuff like that, he does not have this team does not have a higher ceiling with him as the best player than they do if Donovan Mitchell's the best player. Honestly, I feel like they would get enough solid pieces for Gobert that would actually make them a better team moving forward. And simply, I don't think they're going to trade Donovan Mitchell unless he requests a trade. Mitchell is way too young and way too good to be traded for Rudy Gobert, who is much more of a veteran center. And he's a guy who's getting older every year and less impactful every postseason. Every year, Rudy Gobert gets less valuable to the league. And honestly, if they're trading one of these two guys, it's definitely Rudy Gobert. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know who you think the Jazz should trade, Donovan Mitchell or Gobert. Drop a like on this video to help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. Also, if you want to reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers. Also, drop a comment on this video as I do respond to all of my comments. And play that intro.